exposing the more than 10 million mysterious stone structures scattered throughout southern Africa. And that is clearly a very large number of stone structures and a very definite indication that we're dealing with a vanished civilization that we know very little about. The big question is, what happened to them? And why are so few of these structures visible today? These are two examples of what are referred to as the Sumerian kings lists. A number of these kings lists have been found. These two of particular interest because they were found at different places at different times, and yet they contain exactly the same information. The larger one obviously contains more information than the smaller one, but yet they contain the core of the information is the same. And they basically tell us about a long period of time that spans more than 220,000 years and cites a number of kings, the same kings by name and by region, that ruled the world. It also tells us that these kings were appointed by the gods in a statement that says that kingship was lowered to earth from heaven, or after kingship descended from heaven. And so we realize that this is most likely the beginning of the royal bloodlines on planet Earth. One of the key things that we read in these two particular tablets is, at the end of it, it says, and then the flood swept over. And I believe that this is what happened to this vanished civilization. And this brings us to the Sumerian connection. And we discover that there is, as there is with most parts of this planet, a very clear and distinct connection between the Sumerian civilization, the Sumerian tablets, and the civilizations of southern Africa. And this is where we meet the Anunnaki gods, or the Anunnaki, as the Sumerian texts refer to them. And we meet Anu, Enlil, and Enki, what could be described as the Sumerian Holy Trinity. And we got to ask ourselves, well, what is all this activity in southern Africa about? And as always, as we've mentioned before, it's always about the gold. We cannot separate our origins and our history from our obsession with gold. But I have to point out at this point that whenever the explorers from Europe, or should we call them the conquerors, not necessarily explorers, what they found was a huge amount of gold. All these ancient cultures seem to have a lot of gold, but they always told them that the gold doesn't belong to us. The gold belongs to the gods. And therefore, we realize that the Anunnaki were in charge of this vast gold mining empire on planet Earth, and the gold always belonged to them. So the ancient history of southern Africa is all about the gold, but there's a more recent history that we can explore as well. And so we move on to what we can call the golden surprise. Because what we'll find, and this is a very important thing for us to digest, the Anunnaki were not interested in the shiny, metallic form of gold. This is where our obsession comes from. But the Anunnaki and the gods were interested in the white powder of gold, or the monatomic form of gold. There are over 600 African mythologies that talk about the sky gods coming down to earth and doing a variety of things. The Zulu African tradition is a specifically interesting one because it comes from southern Africa. And they refer to the sky gods as the Abelungu, who came down from the sky. And what did these Abelungu do? They created the humans. To do what? To be the slaves in the gold mines for the Anunnaki, for the gods. So let's turn to some more examples of more recent gold mining activity, because we cannot escape this thing of mining gold in southern Africa. In the late 1400s, I mentioned already that the Portuguese came around the Cape of Good Hope, or the Cape of Storms, and they come on shore and they meet the native people and they find many stone ruins. And some of them are spectacular, like this image here of Great Zimbabwe, where the walls are 6 meters wide and 10 meters high. Clearly a very strong fortress for ancient cultures and ancient civilizations. When they asked the local people, whose land is this? They were told that this is the Terra dos Macomates. This is, in Portuguese, it means the land of the Macomati people. Well, we got to ask ourselves, who are the Macomati people? And the Makamati people are Dravidian gold miners that go back thousands of years, mining gold, trading with gold, and doing business between southern Africa and southern India. The Dravidians come from the southern part of India and Sri Lanka, and they are well known for their activities and trading with gold for thousands of years. From 700 AD, we have amazing stories from the island of Zanzibar, how Zanzibar was already doing business with the port of Sofala, doing business in gold, trading in gold. Well, where's the port of Sofala? If you don't know where Zanzibar is right between, it's a little island which is also has the terrible history of slavery, where slaves were exported from Africa into the rest of the world. But Zanzibar was a trading post with the port of Sofala. Now, the port of Sofala is further down south on the coast of Mozambique, and it's a well-known port that did a lot of trade into the rest of the world. I didn't realize how important this part of southern Africa was. The Phoenicians did trade there, and pretty much all of the known world was trading with southern Africa from the port of Sofala. In the 11th century, Ahmed al-Biruni describes the prosperous gold exports from the port of Sofala. And so we move on. And the gold was apparently a month journey inland from the port of Sofala. A month trekking inland, where do you get to? You get to Masvingo in Zimbabwe. And that's where you find Great Zimbabwe ruins. And this is a spectacular bit of discovery. Great Zimbabwe, or the House of Stone. Great Zimbabwe itself has far more mysterious meanings than just House of Stone, because encoded in the word Zimbabwe is Zimbabwe, Zimba. Simba, the lion, the roar of the lion, is connected to sound and resonance, and the ability to control sound and resonance that is related to the roar of a lion and the manipulation of sound. There's so much ancient mystery encoded in all of this stuff that it could keep us busy for the rest of our lives. When we get to Great Zimbabwe, we also meet the Monatomic kingdom, the great golden kings that were never defeated. And these were the ancient Southern African kings. And actually the Monatomic kingdom stretched right across Southern Africa into Central Africa and into Zambia and Kenya and Tanzania. And it was a huge kingdom that lasted for hundreds of years. And these were the guys that were providing the gold for the traders that came to the port of Sofala. It's fascinating that the Monatomic kingdom is also connected further southwest of Great Zimbabwe. We find about 400 kilometers, right on the border of modern-day Botswana, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. We find the famous ruins of Mapungubwe, where there's now a big museum, and the so-called ancestors of the great Zimbabwe ruins. So let's get back to the work in the Abzu and the Sumerian texts that talk about this place called the Abzu, where all the gold came from. There's some spectacular Sumerian translations that we get from Zechariah Sitchin. Now remember, he did not know about any of this when he was writing this stuff down. So what we're doing here is providing the physical evidence for much of his work. This translation is absolutely staggering. It says, in the Abzu, Enki plans was conceiving where to build his house, where for heroes dwellings to prepare, where the bowels of the earth to enter, to mine the gold. Now, is there a ruin or an ancient stone structure that could possibly be seen as Enki's home or Enki's abode? And I suggest that Great Zimbabwe is exactly that place. Since Enki was the founder of this vast gold mining empire, and Great Zimbabwe is by far the most impressive of all the ancient ruins and structures in southern Africa, I suggest that maybe this is the mine manager's house, the big white house on the hill. But there's a lot more to be said about Great Zimbabwe that we may get to in this series. So this is what Enki's house would look like from the air. And you see that very quickly it resembles the millions of stone structures and the stone circles in southern Africa. Some of the most mysterious objects found at Great Zimbabwe were discovered and described by Theodore Bent in the late 1800s and very early 1900s. And these were the mysterious stone birds that can be linked to gold mining in Egypt and gold mining activity by the Anunnaki in southern Africa. These stone birds are fascinating. They are very basic shapes. They're known as birds on pedestals, and some of the most basic ones is just an elongated stone that's got a wing carved into it, and then a little eye at the top of the stone. And normally the stone has got a rounded side that suggests that it's the head of the bird looking up at the sky with a bird, the wing underneath, like in this particular image on the right-hand side. That's a very good example of that. I found many similar bird-shaped stones in the stone ruins of southern Africa, which makes me think that the Zimbabwe birds are a much later version of these very basic bird-like shapes, which is a broad base and a narrow head and a neck that leads up to the head that looks up for protection from the gods in the sky. And suddenly these birds become giant monoliths and giant standing stones that have been carved out into the shapes of birds in a much larger fashion than just smaller statues. Here is a translation once again that we find in Sitchin's work, referring to this gold mining activity and the creation of Adam and Adamu in southern Africa. Let us create a Lulu, a primitive worker, the hardship work to take over. Let the being the toil of the Anunnaki carry on his back. And it continues, where they decide to create the Adam, or the first being, as a slave. A primitive worker shall be created. Our command will he understand. Our tools he will handle. To the Anunnaki in the Abzu relief shall come. Over and over again, we hear about the Abzu, the gold mining, and a primitive worker that needs to be brought into existence to help the Anunnaki get more gold out of the ground. I'm Michael Tellinger. Thanks for watching.